Hey there, it's Steve from Serious Keto, and this is the Not So Serious Keto video podcast. Where should I start this week? I think what I'll do is I'll cover a topic that I talked about last week and give you what I hope is a helpful hint. So last week I talked about some of the things that I would do differently if I were starting keto all over again, and one of them was to not be so crazy buying ingredients. I felt I needed to buy every ingredient that was in any keto recipe just so that I could be prepared to make every keto recipe. And it turns out that a lot of them are still just sitting on my shelf 5-6 years later. And hopefully they're still good. I should probably check that. But here is the tip. If you go to seriousketo.com and click the search bar, you can type an ingredient and any of my recipes that use that ingredient will show up. So if, say, you're thinking, why do I have psyllium husk or psyllium husk powder? You can go and type in psyllium husk on the search bar on seriousketo.com, and any recipe that uses it will show up. Now, I don't know if this works on all websites. I know that it does work on the particular recipe card plugin that I have on Serious Keto, and I know that Wes at Highfalutin Low Carb also uses the same plugin, so it might work on his website as well. Anyhow, hopefully that will help you figure out if you've got a mystery ingredient that you know you bought for some keto recipe, but you're not sure which one. This is a way to maybe find out. I've got a couple of more quick topics before I get on to the more lengthy topic. And the first one is going to be on Carnivore and Facebook. So I've talked before about the Carnivore Facebook groups that I've seen or that show up in my feed and just how absolutely toxic it is. And that's not Carnivore's fault. That's just, for some reason, that particular group seems to be a magnet for everybody that wants to be in an internet fight. So and I don't know why I continue to look at it. It's like picking at a scab. I know I shouldn't, but I do. But I'm not going to get into the negatives on that. We're going to keep this all upbeat. One of the things that I wonder about, and I'm asking this for those of you who are carnivore, is people are always posting pictures of their meals. I've talked about this, for whatever reason, lots of times with a handgun next to it. I don't get that. But it's like a steak, a pile of bacon, and 5 eggs. Or 2 steaks and a pile of bacon and 5 eggs. It's always just a huge amount of food. I can't imagine even on one meal a day eating that much food. And I'm wondering, is that how much you eat when you're on carnivore? And the reason I'm asking is because I get really pretty full, or pretty satiated at least, when I'm eating more or less carnivore, when it's just eggs and bacon and cheese and meat. So I'm wondering how somebody can actually plow through a meal that's that big. Let me know down in the comments below. A couple of quick channel updates, and then I'll get on to my longer topic. So topic number 1, there are going to be 2 Keto Chow videos this week. Don't let that throw you. Don't let that make you think that this is turning into the Keto Chow channel. It was merely a timing thing. There's the monthly giveaway box, and then there was a little bit of a snafu with them, with Keto Chow, getting out their newest flavor, which by now probably anybody that's a Keto Chow fan knows what it is. It's coconut cream pie. And they're just, because it came out late, or because I got it late, the review is late. So 2 videos this week. This is not becoming the Keto Chow channel. Additionally, I realize that I have not been kicking out recipe videos at the same pace as I have historically. And part of it is just, the longer you go and the more recipes you have, the more difficult it is, I think, to come up with something new. And that's been the case for me. And I think also with the long winter, I just got a little bit melancholy, didn't have as much inspiration. However, over the last week, I've had a fair amount of inspiration. I've had a lot of ideas. Not all of them have worked, but it's been fun trying them out. And I kind of feel like I'm at that same sort of having fun place that I was a few years ago. So I hope this is just, I've turned the corner around winter and seasonal affective disorder, and I'm ready to start cooking. Plus, it's starting to get nice outside, so there could be more stuff out on the grill and or smoker. So I'm very excited for that. I'm enthused. If you've been wondering about the frequency of cooking videos, they're coming back. So stay tuned. When I did my segment on what I would do differently if I were starting keto all over again, one of the questions that I got was, what degree of importance would you put on ketone and blood glucose testing if you were to do it all again, especially given that I'm metabolically healthy or well, at least I am now. But I don't have type 2 diabetes. I didn't have type 2 diabetes. I was not ever diagnosed as pre-diabetic, which is kind of surprising to me. But I just went in as someone who was doing this to lose weight. So how important is it to measure ketones and measure blood glucose? I would say ketones fairly important, at least initially. I think whether you're measuring them with the little urine sticks or whether you're measuring them with a blood ketone reader like the Keto Mojo. I'm not sure if there's other brands out there. I use the Keto Mojo. I think there's breath ketone analyzers. I think that's good initially, especially if you're not super strict keto. But I think actually regardless, I think ketone testing, at least initially, until you get used to knowing what your body feels like in a state of ketosis. So what about glucose monitoring if you're metabolically healthy? I think if you're fairly strict and clean on your keto, probably not necessary. If, however, you're purchasing keto-branded products, bread, tortillas, crackers, whatever it is, something labeled keto, some sort of a snack, then I think it's more important that you check your glucose. Now, there's a lot of information and probably misinformation about blood glucose testing, specifically when you're doing finger sticks. So, for whatever reason, some people are taught that you should measure yourself before eating and then measure yourself 2 hours later. And I think you're missing a big part of the picture if you do that. I mean, almost never do I not, well, that's a double negative. Almost always, if you take my baseline and you take my 2 hours later, I'm either at the same place 2 hours later or even lower 2 hours later. But what I'm missing is this whole part of the story right here, which might have been this. It might have been a great big spike and then back down, and I don't see that. And generally what I find is the spike occurs somewhere in the 45 to 60 minute range for me. So if you're doing blood glucose testing and you really want to be effective, I think, in terms of testing out a product, this involves testing before you eat, probably 30 minutes after, an hour after, and then at 2 hours. In my early videos when I was doing glucose testing, that's how I did it. So 4 finger sticks per food. You got to be pretty interested in blood glucose to do that, I think. The other issue with consumer blood glucose monitors is there is some variation in the measurement. I mean, you can poke yourself and from the same blood draw do 2, 3 strips in a row, and you are not going to get the same number. Maybe it varies by 5 points. Sometimes maybe it even varies by 10 points, 10 milligrams per deciliter of glucose. That makes a difference if it's off in one direction or the other. The thing is, that's still within the FDA's guidelines. So these products that you can buy, whether it's a Keto Mojo or you get some less expensive just blood glucose monitor, I think you can get them for under 20 bucks. They still have the same degree of fluctuation or variability in the measurement. So there's that. Which brings me to continuous glucose monitors. So both Abbott and Dexcom make continuous glucose monitors, both prescription level and over-the-counter level. And I have had mixed results with both of them. I have not used any of the over-the-counter products. So this will be limited to the Abbott Freestyle Libre, the Dexcom G6 and G7. I prefer Dexcom, at least versus the original Freestyle Libre. I found about 1 out of every 3 Freestyle Libre detectors that I had, they would fail. They would fail generally within 24 hours. So I started using Dexcom. I like Dexcom better. Dexcom also allows you to do a calibration. So you can take a reading and you say, whoa, 116, that seems odd at this time of day. I'm not usually that. And then you take a blood glucose test and you're like 85. So then you can recalibrate and it resets the device, which I like. I don't think you can do that on Abbott. At least you couldn't used to back with the Freestyle Libre. The issue I also run into with the Dexcom is the first day is pretty wonky in terms of readings. They're kind of all over the place. It seems like it takes about a day to stabilize, and then at that point I make the decision whether or not I'm going to calibrate it. But it's not completely without effort. So some people think it's a continuous glucose monitor. I'm just going to strap it on. Well, you don't strap it on, it inserts. But I'm gonna insert it, and then it's gonna be smooth sailing, no more work for me over the course of the next week or 10 days or 14 days. But there is still work for you because you're kind of looking at it whenever you have a meal. You should be probably logging meals. And then to further complicate matters, time of day and what sort of state you're in can play a big role in terms of your glucose readings. So, how well did you sleep? Are you currently in a fasted state when you test your glucose? If it's morning, are you still in the dawn effect where, your glucose kind of gradually ramps up a little bit in the morning? For me, at the end of the day, it just keeps going down. Very often in the evening, regardless of what I have for dinner, I'm down probably in the mid 70s for my glucose. Additionally, if I have a product, like I'm doing product testing, and I have something like a bread or something like that, and it spikes my glucose, later on in the day, if I were to have that same bread again, I'm not going to experience as much of a bump. I don't know totally why that is. I'm sure it has something to do with insulin, and that's about the extent. I only took one semester of pre-med, so that's all I got for you. So if all of this is sounding a little bit complicated and convoluted, that's because it is. So as you're trying to decide whether or not you should be measuring blood glucose, I think the questions I would ask myself is, how strict am I going to be on keto? If I'm going to be pretty strict, then I probably don't need to be measuring my blood glucose. If, however, I want to be a little bit more experimental, have a little bit more latitude or variety in my keto, then you need to decide, is it worth the effort? Is it worth the effort to do the measurements to see if some of these sort of, I don't want to call them fringe foods, but sort of not super duper strict keto foods, we'll call them that. If you want to be trying out those and seeing how they affect you, how they affect your ketones, how they affect your glucose, then yeah, you probably should test. And the great thing is now there are the 2 over-the-counter continuous glucose monitors, making it a little bit easier and a little bit more financially viable for people to try out. And it's still my hope that sometime soon, Apple and/or Android will put the technology in their watches to make a non-invasive glucose monitor. That would be super duper cool. But that is going to be it for this podcast. This is going to be a 4-video week to make up for last week's 2-video week. But like I said, thanks for watching the podcast. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with me. Thanks for leaving comments. Thanks for clicking like. I think that's it. Aside from, thanks for watching.